Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas here on France 24. I'm Delano D'Souza. Coming up on the show this week, Bolivia's president calls the post-election violence a coup. Evo Morales certain of an election victory without a runoff. Chile's president apologizes for the failures of the past government. Sebastián Piñera announcing a raft of measures to keep protesters off the street. And 4 major drug companies in the United States reach a $260 million settlement with 2 counties in Ohio over responsibility for the opioid epidemic. But first, Bolivia's president says the post-election protest in his country is like a coup. He says he's certain of an election win without a runoff. Suspicions of vote manipulation were sparked after the Electoral Tribunal halted an electronic counting system on Sunday after it showed the president was headed for a runoff against his rival Carlos Mesa. Monte Francis, meanwhile, takes a look at the man credited with reducing poverty in the country during his time in office.
A former farmer himself, Evo Morales began his political career as a charismatic union leader for cocoa growers. He first ran for president in 2002, wanting to bring Bolivia's indigenous people into the political mainstream. Morales lost that race, but ran again in 2005, becoming Bolivia's first indigenous leader the following year. Morales was part of a wave of left-wing leaders who swept into power across South America in the early 2000s. With no prior executive experience, he helped lift millions of Bolivians out of extreme poverty by investing in social programs and nationalizing the country's oil and gas industries.
Petroleras.
Oil companies. Respect the dignity of Bolivians, respect Bolivian rules, and respect this decision of the Bolivian people. If you don't show respect, we will make you respect us by force, because this is about respecting the rights of a country.
Since he took office in 2006, Bolivia's rate of extreme poverty has dropped from 38% to 17%. A change that helped him win 3 elections by landslides. After that third win, Morales tried to do away with term limits established by Bolivia's constitution. He put forward a referendum which lost by a narrow vote. But then, in what was a controversial move, the Constitutional Court scrapped presidential term limits altogether, clearing the way for Morales to run again after almost 14 years in office.
We would like to have 5 more years in office so that Bolivia can continue to grow economically, to finish our large projects like constructions of roads and airports.
But violence has overtaken Bolivia in the wake of the latest election after Morales claimed victory. His opponents called foul, and international monitors voiced deep concern. On Wednesday, Morales made an accusation of his own.
I've called this news conference to declare before Bolivia and the whole world a coup is underway. But we already knew it was coming. The right has been preparing for this coup with international support.
In recent years, critics have accused Morales of undergoing a sort of metamorphosis, taking on an authoritarian style. He built a 29-story presidential residence and a lavish museum paying tribute to his accomplishments. Critics also accuse Morales of using strong-arm tactics to silence his opponents.
Chile's president has announced a raft of measures to keep people from taking to the street. Sebastián Piñera said he hoped to turn the recent violent protests into an opportunity for the country. The president even apologizing for past governments that failed to stem inequalities in Latin America's 5th largest economy.
Hoping to end the violence that has engulfed his country for almost a week, President Sebastián Piñera announced the package of social reforms on Tuesday. Included are a 20% increase in the minimum pension rate, frozen electricity prices, and higher taxes on the most wealthy. The president then apologized for not understanding the concerns of the people.
It is true that the problem we're facing did not suddenly appear in recent days. They have been building for several decades. This level of inequality and abuse has led to a genuine and sincere reaction from millions and millions of Chileans. I recognize my lack of understanding and ask for forgiveness.
Initially sparked by a proposed hike in metro fares, the protests soon morphed into broader anger at social inequality. But they have been marred by looting and arson. Over a dozen people have been killed, and locals have panicked that supplies may run out.
We're stocking up on goods because we don't know what is going to happen. Every day, rather than getting better, the system is getting worse.
President Piñera hopes his reforms will be enough to stamp out the violence, but further strikes and protests have already been planned over the next few days.
Justin Trudeau has secured a second term in office, the Canadian Prime Minister retaining power but losing both his majority and the popular vote. Trudeau thanked voters and promised his Liberal Party would govern for everyone, regardless of how they voted.
From coast to coast to coast, tonight, Canadians rejected division and negativity. They rejected cuts and austerity, and they voted in favor of a progressive agenda and strong action on climate change.
To our number of the week next, and it's $260 million. That was a settlement 4 major drug companies reached with 2 Ohio counties over responsibility for the opioid epidemic. Now, in the United States, it killed around 130 people every single day. The crisis has devastated entire communities, torn apart families, and left many people without a future. But in some places, there are glimmers of hope. Andrew Hillier reports.
Emily McIntyre's opioid addiction has already cost her custody of her 2 children. With a 3rd child due in barely a few weeks, 26-year-old Emily is desperate to get to grips with a nightmare that has torn her family apart.
Addiction is a full-time job. It really is, and it completely managed my life for 6 years.
Emily's path to drug addiction began when she was just 18. It started with a legally prescribed painkiller called OxyContin before she turned to heroin and then cocaine.
My kids needed to be taken from me for me to focus on myself and fix myself. And they're not the reason I got sober, but they're my biggest motivation as to why I got sober. And I don't ever want my kids to see me in active addiction again.
But now there could be light at the end of the tunnel. For the last 7 months, Emily has been enrolled in a rehabilitation program that she hopes will reunite her with her children. She's not alone. By her side is Angela, a former addict, and now Emily's recovery coach.
I think it makes it more manageable, less fearful for the individual that has to put forth that effort. Just having somebody who's went through that process, tell you and kind of help prepare you for what it's going to look like, some of the things that you may experience.
In the first 9 months of the year, at least 60 people died from overdoses in Turnbull County, where Emily's hometown of Warren is located. The crisis has triggered a string of lawsuits against big pharmaceutical companies, who are accused of withholding information about the risks of addiction.
It has become a huge issue and a huge problem out here. A lot of my friends are gone from this crisis that we have that goes on. They don't make it. I'm fortunate to have made it.
On Monday, 4 major drug makers announced a multi-million-dollar settlement hours before they were due to go on trial. The money will be used to compensate communities like Emily's that have been devastated by the epidemic.
Now, CCTV footage of a US high school student being disarmed after he was hugged by a football coach has gone viral. Many social media users praise the empathy the teenager was shown. The incident itself took place in May, but the district attorney's office only released the video last week. Kathy Clifford reports.
On May 17th, then 18-year-old Angel Granados Diaz arrived at school carrying a shotgun. By coincidence, the school's football coach arrived at the same time, passing the pupil in the corridor and entering the classroom just moments before him.
A fraction of a second, I analyzed everything really fast. I saw the look in his face. I realized it was a real gun, and then my instincts just took over.
Taking the weapon from the student, the coach kept physical contact with him as he handed it to another teacher. Those in the classroom then ran out of the building.
I can see him coming into the room with just a gun in his hand. It was terrifying. It was truly terrifying.
We all hid. We hid like under clothes and stuff too, just in case anything would happen.
The coach stayed in the corridor with the pupil, hugging him and keeping him in a firm embrace until police arrived.
I felt compassion for him. And a lot of times, especially when you're young, you don't realize what you're doing until it's over. I told him I was there to save him. I was there for a reason, and that this is a life worth living.
Investigators have since discovered the young man had suicidal tendencies. They believe he didn't intend to hurt anyone but himself. He was given a 3-year suspended prison sentence and is obliged to receive psychiatric support.
That's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. From all of us on the team, thank you very much for watching.
Keep up to date on the latest from the Middle East. We bring you political, economic, and cultural events from the region in this weekly Middle Eastern program.
Middle East Matters, presented by Sanam Chantier on France 24 and France24.com.